What's up, guys? Christmas came early for me. Not for me, but for the shop. So we've got a 92-ish, I'll have to confirm the year, Nissan Hardbody extended cab. And we are going to put this thing on the ground. Truck's pretty clean. We are changing the wheels. I just wanted to get a quick little walk around video of it. Right now it's lowered with just crank torsion bars and I assume lowering blocks in the rear. We'll confirm that when we get it up in the air. But yeah, ride's pretty bad. The 20s that are on it don't clear anything, so those are going to go bye-bye. And yeah, we're going to get him set up where it's driving nicely and rolling properly and sitting on the ground. So I'll try to take you along, try to remember to hit record as we go, and I'll show you what all's involved. So stay tuned and we'll get started. All right, well, we got the bed off, wheels off, and got the truck up in the air. And we're gonna go over it with you real quick, show you what we found before we start teardown and figuring out the game plan. So let me flip the camera around and I'll show you what it looks like underneath. All right, starting up front. No rust issues, which is always good. Brakes are fine. Steering, tie rod ends, kind of wore out. Ball joints kind of wore out. Tension rod, bushing completely missing on this side and just pretty much done for on this side. You can see from the polished area on the control arm that this thing's been riding on the bump stops for a long time. When I pulled it in the shop, it did not have a whole lot of travel. So I'll bet this thing didn't ride very good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing his reaction when he feels it riding on air with plenty of travel. A couple leaks, nothing major there. Exhaust on this V6 truck is way below the frame. That crossover pipe runs right under the transmission, and that ain't gonna work. So once we get the torsion bars out of the way, we'll see what we can do to reroute that through this cross member and then maybe merge it back here somewhere. I don't know that a true split dual on a VG30 V6 would sound good. In my experience, there's not many good sounding V6s, but you guys are welcome to send me links to good sounding ones down in the comments if you disagree. But regardless, I think we're going to try and merge it back and then get it all tucked up and above the frame level. Moving back, yeah, that exhaust is done. So that ain't going to work. I noticed shifting from reverse to drive that we had a big, nice clunk. Carrier bearing's not completely worn out, but they're also pretty cheap to replace. And this U-joint, I noticed some slop in it. So we're gonna go ahead and rebuild the drive shaft while everything's apart and put new U-joints and a new center support bearing in. Back here, axle's solid, no leaks, no real issues. Again, with the lowering blocks and removing a couple leaf springs, it looks like it was just riding directly on the bump stops. So yeah, that's not a recipe for a smooth ride. There's that valve assembly for the load compensator. We're gonna get rid of all of that stuff and clean up all the brake line routing. And then you can see the gas tank is mounted on this cross member at the back. So that cross member is right where we're gonna be putting the frame notch in. So we'll end up having to make a new bracket to meet up with the new higher frame level. Aside from that, pretty straightforward stuff. So today, I'm just gonna work on tearing everything down, getting the stock suspension out of here, and getting ready for the modifications for the new stuff. So Stick around and we will put together a montage.
All right, normally I would leave the nut partially threaded on here while we break the ball joint loose. On this, there's no tension on the lower control arm anymore because we already pulled the torsion bar out, and the upper arm is already on the upper travel limiter or bump stop. So all that's going to happen when I break this loose is this arm's just going to swing down. Because we had the trouble getting this off after breaking the ball joint off, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it off. Don't normally do that. Another risk, aside from having stuff under tension and having it fall on your foot or whatever, if you miss your swing and hit the threads, it'll damage them and then you're really stuck. In this case, I didn't care because we're changing the ball joints anyway. So again, do as I say, not as I do. All right, so that's upper and lower control arms, steering, and idler arm all removed. I've got to cut this old bushing out of here, or just pull it. So yeah, we've got all the new front suspension components ordered already. We're going to do all new upper and lower control arms with new bushings and ball joints. New idler arm, new center link and inner and outer tie rod ends and adjusters and all that. And then we've got a pair of Beltec drop spindles. So we'll transfer over the hubs and rotors and everything over to those. Check the bearings while we're at it. They feel fine, but we'll at least repack them. Other than that, let me grab the camera off the tripod here and I'll show you what the game plan is up here. All right, so basically on a torsion bar vehicle, we don't have a spring pocket or a coil spring area that we can just change out for a bag and a cup or whatever. So on this, we're gonna cut all of this lower bracketry out of the way. So your lower control arm bolts way down here, and we're gonna tie that back into the frame. You see some gaps right there and everything. So we'll add that structure in after we do this cutting for clearance because all this has to go away. We'll get rid of, well, we probably don't need to eliminate the upper shock tower. We'll take a look and see if anything's in the way. That may stay in place. But anyway, the plan is basically upper control arm bolts back here. We want the bag to sit right around here. So we're gonna notch this in a little bit, get us to the actual frame rail, and we'll have a plate that welds right in here and gets gusseted in, tied into this upper structure so it's nice and strong. We'll run a 6-inch Slam Specialties bag, and then the lower control arm, we'll put the lower bag plate on it, just weld it on, cut the old shock mount off, and that's basically it for the front end. So, what else? Yeah, he's running some 17-inch wheels. So I don't know if we're gonna have to get up into this structure at all. We'll probably pull at least the plastic fender liners, but we'll look and see what clearances are like for all of this stuff. And hopefully it'll lay frame. We don't have to get into any major relocation of stuff under the hood or anything, but if we have to, we have to. Other than that, just bolt everything back together, go get it aligned, and it should be good to go. So let me move over to the back and we'll get all of that disassembled, and I'll check in with you back there. All right, with the front suspension removed, we're gonna move to the rear. First, I'm gonna get underneath, lift this thing up a little bit, get underneath and pull the drive shaft and probably cut the exhaust off. I know it's gotta get removed anyway, might as well get it out of the way now. So from there, we'll move to the back, pull the leaf springs, drop the axle, drop the gas tank, I think. And you know, all the other stuff back here, just clear the way for some new parts. So let me get this on the tripod and we'll get going. Oh, thank you. Phew. There's always one. So that one of the retainers for the emergency brake cable was right where we have the pad for the lift. And with the gas tank right there and everything, there was just nothing that would get to it except just a box end wrench, turning it a third of a turn at a time. Just how it goes sometimes. Yay. All right, I think we're ready to pull the axle. So we've got the shackles undone and the hangers are undone, e-brake's undone, brake line's undone, drive shaft's out, shocks are unbolted. So I'm gonna drop this down, find a furniture dolly to put the thing on, and we should be ready to rock. One thing we want to stay mindful of when pulling the rear suspension apart is basically we're getting this thing down to where it's just a bare frame back here, so there's no weight. The front end still has the engine, transmission, all the front sheet metal, bumper, all of that. So we need to make sure we're careful not to take so much weight out of this thing that it just tips on the lift. So I'm just going to lift it up a little bit. I'm going to figure out what hardware needs to come out on the front of the gas tank, and I'll drop it back down low to do the back bolts on the gas tank. And that way we're not up in the air or anything, not any risk of it tipping. So we'll get on that right now. So that's the axle out, gas tank out, and starting to pull all of the factory cross members. I'll probably leave this rear one in for now, just to keep the frame rail centered or parallel or whatever. But that one's got to come out so we can do the frame notch. Yeah, when I've got the Sawzall, I'll get the exhaust off of here, and then we should be all ready to clean everything up and get to modifying. So yeah, pretty smooth sailing. Everything looks like it's in good condition. No broken bolts, no major rust. Just how we like it. So I think we're done for today. I'm gonna clean up and head inside and hang out with some dogs. And I'll check back with you guys tomorrow. All right, we made some progress. I put the gas tank back in so we can figure out the exact position of the upper link cross member, because we need to come basically above the tank, but under the bed floor. So we've got this little area sort of right there to sneak it between the cab wall and where the gas tank sort of dips up. So I came up with a bracket. I'm gonna pick it up from my buddy later today, that basically will bolt to the side of the bed mount and onto the top of the frame rail, and it'll hold a piece of 1.5" DOM tubing and go across to the other side. So that should give us a good solid upper link mount to run back to the axle
For the lower links, I think we're going to use the factory leaf spring hanger location. So if you look at Nissan Hardbodies, you've got the bottom of the frame here and the hanger sits a bit below. So even when lowering these things, it's a common practice to basically cut this off and re-drill your hole up higher. So we're going to do the same thing and basically just make a quick template so that one side matches the other. We'll re-drill a hole and then use one of our standard link bushings in here. I'll have to double check the width, but I'm pretty sure it's the same. From there, on the axle side, we need to pull the leaf springs and shocks and lowering blocks and all that stuff off. And I'm gonna see if our S10 lower 4-link pads fit this axle. If they do, then we're on our way to having a bit of a kit. It won't be completely bolt-on because we'll still need to weld upper link tabs onto the top of the axle, but if we can do most of the work for folks, that might be a nice solution for other Nissan hardbody owners. So stay tuned on that. We'll see what develops. But for now, we need to basically mark the axle center line on the side of the frame, clean up the frame rails, get all the paint and dirt and everything off of them, and get ready to install the frame notch. So that's probably the next big step. And then we've got to do some plumbing work. We're going to bypass the load assist valve or load sensing valve. So basically this truck has tons of brake lines. So the rear brakes are tied into the front brakes through a proportioning valve. Basically, the more load that is in the bed, the more rear brakes it has, or vice versa. If you slam on the brakes super hard and the rear end of the truck goes up as the front dips, it senses that and gives the rear less brakes, so it's less likely to lock up. Anyway, with a truck that goes up and down several inches at the push of a button, we don't want the brake pressure in the rear changing as that happens, and this thing's ugly and in the way. So I did some research online, still found one of the active Nissan forums from back in the day, and learned which lines need to be bypassed up front. So we'll basically bypass the one, and then instead of this line coming in and going into this valve, it'll just go straight to the soft line that runs down to the axle. So I think we've got that dialed. I'm just gonna see what I can do to make it look a little better. Other than that, we cut the exhaust off, and we've got to do more cutting on that so we can figure out the best way to get our clearances. And then we ordered all new replacement control arms and bushings and everything for the front. So those should be here, I think tomorrow or Friday. And then the only other thing we've done is we pulled the stock spindles apart, and I think they're still over here on the workbench, and transferred over the hubs and rotors and everything to a set of Beltec drop spindles, repacked the bearings, and just double checked the rotors and everything were in good shape. So those are ready to reinstall as soon as we have the control arms and finish modifying them. So we'll check back in a bit and hopefully have some more progress to report. Today should be a good day. All right, we got the prototype pieces cut for this bracket. I'm gonna make a little bit of a revision and just kind of give us a little more clearance to the cab because it is super tight there. But basically we've got 2 holes, there they are, down into the frame, and then one tying into this bed support to make everything really solid. I mean, you could weld it in if you want to, but I don't really see the point. And then the plan, when we get the other one bolted on, is to run a piece of 1.5" DOM tubing straight through all of these, weld that all up, and then right in the middle will be a pair of tabs that come off of that for the upper link setup. So over on this side, I'll show you. Basically, we just used the bracket as a template and drilled these 1/2" holes.
These two on the frame, we're going to enlarge to, I believe it is, what's up from 5/8? It's like 11/16. I'll confirm that in just a sec on the drill bit, so that the nutserts can drop in, and then we've got the nutsert tool. So I'll hook up the tripod real quick so you can see drilling that out and installing those. And then we can just thread bolts right into there and a nut and a bolt up here in that hole, and you're good to go. There's a little extension off of this like gusset or reinforcement or whatever that basically hits on the bracket just slightly. So we just had to take a flap wheel and knock that down a little bit so that the bracket can sit flush here and flush here. But yeah, give me just a sec and we'll get this set up and installed. All right, so these are the nutserts we use. And we're basically just going to use our Harbor Freight Unibit, and we're going to go to the second to last position on the bit. Focus. Don't worry about it. Just trust me. Second to last. So we're going to drill these out real quick, and then these should drop in, and then we can tighten them up. One more. Always better to check a few times versus making the hole too big and having to deal with that mess. All right, this one is super close up against the cab, so it's going to end up drilling a little offset, but it'll still work out just fine. Go. All right, now let me show you this, which we've used before on Continentals, is our pneumatic riv nut gun. So you can see there's a forward and reverse, and then a big old thread. So this model does 1/2 which is these guys, and then also 3/8 nutserts without having to use the tool with the big levers. So a lot less effort and a lot quicker. So let me show you how that works. Basically just stick that all the way. Oh, let me move my arm. Here, we'll do it left-handed. That's how easy it is. So basically you just stick the whole nutsert in there after you've threaded it onto the tool. Drive it in. And then just back the tool out. And then we'll do it again. We put a little bit of anti-seize on these threads just to make sure it doesn't gall or catch or anything. Boom. And that's it. So now with that done, I should be able to put this other bracket on. See, that just lays right on here. And we're going to revise this upper plate a little bit with a big opening so it's a little easier to get your hardware in. But you can do it even with this. So I'm going to start by getting one of these in and do it opposite handed to normal so you can see in the camera. Okay, that one's started. And then I'm going to block the camera for a second here. And just get this one through. Oops, actually I don't need the hardware, the washer and nut, or washer and lock washer on that side. Because it goes on the nut side. There we go. That, hand me the nut. Thank you. And the nut threads on here. Trust me, I did that. And then we've got one more bolt, which is the slightly harder one to get in. Let's see if I can do it with my left hand. Yeah. All right. So then we're just going to use a ratchet with an extension, a little universal joint, and we should be able to get these tightened up. I'm going to start with the harder to reach one. There we go. And there's that one. And then let's see if I can do this without having to get in there for that bolt. Tighten up. There we go. All right. So now, the real moment of truth is, are we going to be able to slide that one piece of DOM from one side to the other? Let me tilt this up a little bit. And if we're living life right, should be able to take a piece of DOM and just slide it all the way through from one side to the other. Rick, you want to do the honors? You start on that side because the camera's over here.
Sounds good.
I'll move this just to make sure we have all the clearance. Oh no, it doesn't work. It's a little, oh, because I tack welded a piece in there. There's a little bit of stuff. Hang on a second. You got the burr tool handy?
Well, there's also berries too.
Yeah, let me get it real quick. Get that stuff cleared.
Did you pause it?
Nope. Check this side too. Nothing wrong with chasing it real quick. I don't know if you're a Milwaukee or a DeWalt guy, but this Milwaukee burr tool, or whatever you want to call it, it's a I guess a grinder, but we use it with the all of the burrs, and it's so much better than pneumatic. All right, and then flying a little blind there. All right, let's see if that goes through. If not, we'll cut and then edit this to make it look like it went first shot. Looks like we're missing by just a little bit. So we're gonna need to slot these holes just slightly to get everything positioned where it's all happy. So give us just a couple minutes and we'll get that all dialed in. All right, slight modification later and we are good to go. What we did is that top plate, which was unnecessarily beefy anyway, we cut it so that we could get access to the bolts, and then just loosely bolted the bracket back onto the frame. And with everything just loose on both sides, we were able to flex everything into position, get the bar through, and then tighten everything up. So when we ship these, if someone ends up wanting to do their truck with this kit, then we'll just leave that upper bar unwelded, so you can kind of account for 30 years of being used as a truck, and then get everything into position, centered up, and then weld the bar into the brackets. So again, it's the This was never going to be a full bolt-on kit. I was hoping we could make a cross member that just dropped right on, but I think this is probably the smarter way to go, just to account for any differences from one truck to the next and make it a little more forgiving. So, but anyway, we've got the 2 bolts going into the frame. There's 1 bolt right back there, tucked into the bed support. So it should be nice and stout. We've got our DOM running across, and then we've got this pair of tabs, which won't ultimately be sitting down like that. We'll have them poking out like that. So we'll mark center on the DOM, the cross member tube, once we get it welded in, and then we'll get the position of these figured out exactly where we want them and weld them in. And then from there, we just need to do the notch, the lower links, make another cross member to replace this one, and we're moving right along. All right, we got the frame cleaned up, gas tank out of the way, move the brake lines out of the way for now, and today we are focusing on the frame notch. So when we took the axle out, we measured and marked the center point where the axle is going to be. And when we did the notch plates, we just measured center on those 2. And I've got this lovely antique plumb bob. So we just hang that, whoop, there we go. Hang that right off the center of the notch and make sure it lines up with the center of the frame. And we're good there. And we use a magnetic angle finder and put that on the frame and up on the top of the notch. As long as those numbers match, we're good to go there. And as far as height, you have a couple options with these big step notches. We are choosing, so this truck came in on 20s, and we're actually switching to some 17s for him. So that we don't have to cut as much of the bed and the wheel wells under the hood. But we want to give him the option, if he does want to do that later, we want to get that extra drop and not have to re-notch or remodify this frame. So with that in mind, we're going to run this notch basically at its full height. So we're going to basically just have that barely below the frame level so we can trim it up and make it look clean. But normally what you would do is measure your overall wheel diameter and how much extra drop you need from, you know, where the axle touches this to where you need it to touch when the truck's laid out. And that may end up being, you know, 1 inch or 2 down from there, and you'd just be cutting more material off the bottom. But for this truck's case, the extra height of the notch isn't a big deal. We're already doing a notch cover in the bed anyway, so we'll just make it a little bit taller and no big deal. So I'm going to tack this side in. We're going to repeat this process on the other side, on the outer, and then we can slide our bridge tubing right through here and lock it in, and that'll set the position of the inner notch plates as well. On the inside of the frame, it is not fully boxed, so back here it's open, but over here it is bumped out and reinforced. So we're gonna end up needing to bend the plate over on this side to make everything line back up. So I'll pop back on here when we're at that part and show you what we're gonna do. So for now, let me get the welder moved over and we'll get this all tacked in. All right, we got the other side tacked in. Basically just took a whole bunch of measurements. Once we had it plumbed in with the axle center line here, we matched the angle and then measured the distance from the top of the frame rail to the bottom of the notch and made sure that matched the other side. So once all that was done, everything leveled out nicely, ran the DOM tubing through those holes and brought the inner plates in. So on the inner plate on this side, at the back, we cut a little notch to clear where this reinforcement in the frame is. And we did that just so to clear the little protrusion right there. We're probably going to ditch these shock brackets anyway, but this is a nice little extra strength for the frame back here, so we figured we'd leave that intact. And then up front, likewise, sorry, I'm holding the camera kind of weird. Rather than going on top of this and having a weird bend in the notch plate or anything, basically just cut the side of the notch out to go around it. So I'm going to clean that up real quick, and then we're welding right to a double walled boxed in part of the frame. So it just makes it that much stronger. So let me do the same thing for the other side, clean them up, tack them in, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, that worked out perfectly. So you can see we've got the inner notch plates going right around all that factory support. So everything's tacked into place. For the side plates, we've got the bar running through, so we know they're all lined up to each other, which is great. So now the next step is we're gonna take the top cap, and here I got one right here. And you can see it is way taller than it needs to be. So we're just gonna measure those sides and cut the excess off of these guys. And basically it'll set right down on top of the frame rail. And then we've got a nice, you can see that it's, the top and bottom plates are a little wider than the sides. So we'll have a nice valley to weld into and make this thing nice and strong. So let me cut these down and we'll lay them on top and get them tacked in, and then we're getting close. All right, we had to deviate from the plan slightly. These notch top and bottom plates, I don't know if they're designed to go like up against the side of the side plates or what, but the way they were bent, they wouldn't sit over the top of the notch sides. And I mean, I guess you could cut them down to the width of the frame and nestle them down inside of there, but then you're doing a weird like edge weld, I don't know, whatever. We just basically cut them apart and turn them into individual pieces for the sides and the top, and it worked out fine. So now we've got everything tacked in place. I'm gonna go ahead and weld up all the sides, down across the frame on the top and sides and all of that. And then we'll square this up, make sure it's all good to go. And I'll at least tack these in just to hold them in position. And then we'll be ready to cut the original frame out so we can put the bottom cap in. So yeah, both sides are ready to go. So now it's just a bunch of welding. We've got the notch mostly welded in, so we've added pretty much all the strength that we're about to remove from the frame into the frame. So it should be safe to cut the stock section of frame out of here so we can finish capping in the notch and making it a fully boxed section. So it's welded inside and out. We do still need to make some mending plates for the back to tie it into the frame better, but at least it's locked into position, and it's not going to go anywhere. Not while we're doing this part, and we'll make it stronger before it leaves. So next step is get the Sawzall and very carefully just cut straight down, and do the other side, and then we'll be ready to put the caps in. Look at that. Got a notched frame. Good job, dude. All right, with the frame cut out, we've got the bottom plates, which happen to be bent just fine. For whatever reason, the uppers just weren't, but no big deal, we'll make it work. So yeah, this side is tacked in. On this side, you can see there's the original frame rail. And yeah, so we just cap that and you end up with a fully boxed frame section. So let's get that welded, and then I think we can move on with setting up a 4-link. All right, so we got the notch all the way welded in. We still have to cut the bottoms off. I say all the way welded in, actually we still have a little more to do. We're gonna cut the bottoms off just below the frame level, and then we'll run a bead right across the bottoms to tie that in, and then cut the excess off the bottom over here and do the same. But we got the cross member welded in. We replaced the rear cross member with a piece of 2-inch 3/16 wall DOM, which actually fit through that factory hole. And then for the management, we're gonna use this guy right here. So there's a little more gusseting involved than this, but gives you an idea of what we've got planned. So I'll have the air tank mounted on one side, and then on the other, we'll have 2 Viair 485 compressors, an AVS valve manifold, and the compressor solenoid. So should be a nice tidy setup. Keep everything under the bed and just clean and simple. So with this done, I think we're ready to, we'll center these tabs up on this cross member. We'll get the axle up into the notch and set it in position, and then we'll be able to design the upper link, the wishbone, and cut these guys flush with the bottom of the frame and measure on there where we're going to run the lower link bars back to the axle. So yeah, it should be another productive day. Hopefully we cap off the week. Today's Thursday. Hopefully by tomorrow afternoon, we've got the rear suspension on this thing basically dialed in, if not done, at least everything figured out, so we can move forward from there. All right, little updates. So we cut the bottom of the leaf spring hangers off. Those sit below the frame from the factory. So basically this just gets everything above. I'm gonna mark and drill the hole for the new location of the link bushing. And then I'm gonna make a template off of that. So if anyone needs that, they can just message me. I can email it to them, or if you're buying a kit, just remind me and I'll ship it with it. We're cutting the bottoms of the notches down, and as soon as all that's done, I'll come in here and weld along the bottom of the frame, just to finish off the full boxing of the frame rails there. And then we are also removing these leaf spring shackle mounts, shackle hangers, whatever. So we're gonna get those out of the way. I think we're gonna end up doing a cantilever setup on this, similar to the S10, where we have an arm that runs under the backside of the frame rail up to the axle. So if we're doing that, this will need to go to make room for the airbag location. So let's get the cutting done, and then we'll check back in with you in just a bit. All right, we got everything welded up the rest of the way. So bottoms of the notches are tied into the frame. Made some filler plates to really tie everything together. I think we're still gonna end up boxing at least part of this, but at least for now, that adds some good reinforcement. We went ahead and welded this tube into the cross member, and we got the tabs for the upper wishbone link welded in and just leveled for now. Down here, we cut off all of the excess hanger, and we've drilled for our lower link mounts. So now I think frame fabrication is almost done. We're gonna have to finalize the location of all the management. We've got a plate for all of that to mount to, but for now we're gonna leave them. They met up with a bolt. I don't know if that's actually gonna be the final location, but that's a good start. So the next step is we're going to drop the truck down and pull the axle up into the notch, position it centered, set our pinion angle, and then we can start measuring for all of our links. So stay tuned on that, and we'll check back in just a few. All right, so we've got the axle back into the notch and about at the lowest point that it's going to end up, at least with these wheels. We've mocked it up with the pinion angle about where it needs to be, close enough for us to design the lower link bars. So what we're going to do is actually try to use the lower axle brackets that we have for our S10 4-link. They've already got the cantilever attachment, they've got a shock mount, and they extend down a bit to get the bar out of the notch when you are going under the frame rail. So if they'll work and we don't have to design new ones, that is good news. So we're gonna get those bolted on, measure up for some lower bars, and see how that goes. All right, checking back in. So we got the axle all centered up and in position, measured and built some lower link bars that go into the factory leaf spring hanger and then back to our brackets on the axle. And that extension on the inside of that bracket will be for the lower shock mount. So we'll get that dialed in after we've got everything else done. And then we rehung the gas tank on the factory front mount under the cab, and then took the factory rear bracket, and since it had no home on the frame anymore, we modified it a bit with some tabs and bent it a little and secured it to the side of the notch. So that is going to work out perfect. While we were kind of laying out the upper link, it looks like it made more sense to do 2 brackets on the cross member and a single pivot point back here on the axle. I wanted to have a pivot closer to centered, but I also don't want it sticking way up and causing any kind of issues like through the bed or any of that. So we went ahead and went with some tabs over here and added another pair of tabs to the cross member, and then we're working on a wishbone. So we've got a piece of DOM tubing right there that my buddy Garrett over at Trick Toys put a bend in for us, because I haven't gotten myself a tubing bender just yet. First time I've needed one, might be on the list. So we've got the straight upper link bar cooling down right now, and we'll get that installed and then measure up exactly where the cut and cope needs to happen for the wishbone portion to tie into it. So stay tuned, I'll check in with you in a few. All right, that was a success. So we got the straight link bar in, and then coped that side and got the bushing in, and then just sort of laid the angled bar on top and sort of just scribed a line, and then just measured and cut it by hand. And yeah, it all seems to fit really well. I've had it off and on a couple times as I've tacked and then finish welded everything, and it didn't twist up or do anything funky while it was being welded, so happy for that. I am going to probably do a plate across here just to reinforce it, maybe give it a little bit of style, I don't know, a couple holes, something like that, but should work out pretty well. Tomorrow, if I get some shop time out here, I'm going to get underneath, put the drive shaft back in, just make sure that cycles the way it's supposed to. And then basically we're just down to figuring out the cantilever setup in the rear and shocks. I think shocks, we're just gonna come off of these lower shock mounts that are part of the kit, and then probably just add some tabs right up here, get some shocks that match the length we need, and we're good to go there. I still have to figure out all the plumbing to bypass the load sensing valve. And I think at that point the rear's about done, and we can move to the front and then do some management, and we'll be good to go. All right, getting back into this thing today. Goals for today are finish up the rear suspension. So that is create a plate for the wishbone and reinforce it, and then dial in the cantilever setup. So I started back here. It worked out that, here we go, let me grab this. So this is the frame bracket for an S10 cantilever add-on for the bolt-on four-link that we designed for it. So this is designed, that upper slotted hole goes up in through the factory leaf spring shackle mount, and then the lower hole is where the cantilever bolts on. So on an S10, it just bolts right in, no modification. On the hard body, the position of the shackle hanger is below the frame instead of through it. So that position wasn't going to work. It was also a little too far forward. So I guess hard bodies have slightly shorter leaf springs than S10s. But when we got everything into position, this bracket actually fit perfectly between the bed mount and the cross member that we welded into that big 2-inch hole at the back of the frame. So with that, it's a little too wide, but we can use spacers real easily and center it up. So I went ahead and drilled a hole through the frame, 9/16 hole. And then on both sides, I just cut a plate to box in that section of the frame and then put a crush sleeve in between. And now we can run a 9/16 bolt straight through there to bolt that bracket in. And then I've got some on the shelf. I had these. Let me see if they're too hot to touch. Nope. 9/16 by 1/2 inch wide spacers. So this frame is 2 inches wide, at least where we welded in that plate. And then that bracket is 3-inch wide. So if we just take up the difference with 2 of these spacers, it'll center it up perfectly. And then we can drill the other 2 holes on the bottom of the frame to match these 2 points. And then that is completely in place and bolted in. So not a complete bolt in, but pretty minimal modification. So then from there, let me show you the cantilever arm if you haven't seen our S10 kit. So that is the cantilever, and I've just got some mock-up bushings popped into the pivot point for now. But basically that'll go under the frame. The bag will mount there, and then we'll put a bag plate on the bottom of the frame rail and then reinforce that section as well since it's carrying the weight of the truck. But yeah, this should be, knock on wood, we'll mock it up once those welds cool down. But this is shaping up to be a pretty simple rear setup. So kind of excited about that. It's nice when everything kind of works out. So yeah, I'm gonna run and grab some brake fittings and some paint and try and put some closure to the back end of this thing today. So I'll be back in just a bit. All right, just a quick check-in because I do have to go pick up paint and brake fittings and all that stuff. But I wanted to get this mounted and share it with you guys. So that location's gonna work out perfectly. You can see this is the only real modification we still need to do. Where the old shackle hanger was, we're gonna have to cut that back to about here so that the bag plate can install onto the frame right here to center up the bag over this, this lower plate. But we'll just cut those welds, get that piece off of there, and then that'll go away. Then we can drill the holes and mount the upper bag plate where it belongs right here, right under the frame. Cut a little notch for the fitting for the airline. And then what I'll probably do is on either side of that, I'll add some mending plates just to box in the frame right here. Just to add some strength. All the weight of the back of the truck is gonna be pushing up right at this point. So we wanna do everything we can just to add that strength in, but still leave access to be able to unbolt the bag and change a fitting and stuff like that. So we don't wanna lock any of that stuff up. But this is sitting right over or right under the big 2-inch DOM cross member that we added to the frame back here. So that point should be nice and solid. This is working out really well. So I need to determine for the dog bone length, we need to get the axle pushed up to where it's going to be when it's all the way laid out. And then we'll know the distance between this bolt hole and this bolt hole. And then we can make the little pivot joint that attaches the cantilever arm to the rest of the suspension. So I'll get that dialed in just a bit, and I'll check back in when I've got more to show. All right, I think we've got fabrication basically done on the rear end. So we're gonna start disassembling and and get everything painted to put together for hopefully the last time. So we did a quick little brace right there, just needs a little cleanup and then some paint. And we're gonna basically, I found the axle was shifted just slightly over towards the driver's side, and we didn't incorporate any adjustment into this upper link. So what I'm gonna do is actually cut this bushing off and add a threaded, put a bung in the bar and put a threaded end on here. So we'll be able to actually lengthen and shorten there, which will swing the whole axle left and right and give us full adjustment. So I'll do that on the bench and then it'll be ready to go back together. We're gonna pull the tank back out, finish cleaning and painting it, and then get the whole frame painted, link bars, all that stuff. And hopefully by the end of today, we're going back together with everything. So stay tuned. All right, closed doors, spray paint, exhaust fumes from a diesel heater. Definitely doing our lungs some favors today. All right, so we've got the wishbone, the air management plate, and all of the 4-link parts all drying on the table. We went gloss black on those, painted the top of the gas tank and the chassis in satin black, so it should be a nice little contrast. And once all this dries, we can start reassembling it. We still need to clean up the axle and get it painted. We'll do that, and then we'll head out to lunch and let all this stuff sit for a bit. But stoked how it all looks so far. Can't wait to get it all back together. All right, I think we're gonna call it a night. It is almost 6 o'clock. Actually, it is 6 o'clock. So we're gonna clock out. Rock Auto FedEx finally delivered the Rock Auto order. So I've got all the control arms, tie rod ends, tension rod bushings, idler arm, all that stuff, and the parts to rebuild the drive shaft, which is good because I think we are about done with the rear suspension. So took a little longer for paint to dry today because it's in the 40s, but we got it and everything is bolted in and tightened up. I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. So we still need to mount all of the management stuff. I need to finish plumbing the brakes back together. And then lots of wiring and plumbing. But other than that, gas tank's hooked back up. All the suspension parts are tight. I've got to reconnect the e-brake under the cab, but it looks like I need to cycle the suspension, but I think the e-brake cables are going to work out just fine in their location. So yeah, it's all shaping up pretty well. We've got, that is full extension of the shock, and you can see the bag isn't stressed, isn't fully inflated or anything, but it should ride really, really good set up like this. And we've got enough travel to go lower than he needs to go as well. So yeah, this should be a pretty rad setup. I can't wait to take it for a drive. Tomorrow I get to drive up to Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. The wheels that I hunted down for him, this is all on me, just to be clear. He had those 20-inch Armada wheels or Titan wheels or whatever they are. Those were not an option. They're too wide. The offset was too wide, and we're not doing 20s on this thing. We're not cutting it up that much. So these were some 17-inch Eagles that Buddy had on his Isuzu. And without thinking, I said, yeah, let's do those. Sure, if they tuck on an Isuzu, they'll tuck on a hardbody, right? Well, wrong. These bolted onto the rear axle are about 3.5 inches wider than the bed sides. So, oops, my bad. I guess I have some 17-inch Eagle billet looking wheels. Maybe I need to find something 6-lug to put them on. But in the meantime, I found him some pretty cool wheels up there that I think the specs show they should tuck really well. So we'll see what needs to be done to make them fit. But I'll share those with you tomorrow when we bring them home. So in the meantime, go get some dinner and chill out with the dogs for a little bit. We'll see you tomorrow. All right. Instead of dealing with cleaning up all of the stock control arms and everything we took off, we're going to put all brand new suspension and steering on the front. So Rock Auto to the rescue. We were able to get new upper and lower control arms preloaded with bushings and ball joints, steering center link, inner and outer tie rod ends and adjusters, a new idler arm, bushings for the tension rods, and then we're also rebuilding the drive shaft with all new U-joints and a carrier bearing. So wanted to show you brand new parts before we get our fingerprints all over them and cut them apart and modify them and all that, because there's a little of all that going on. These lower shock mounts need to get cut off of the lower arms because we're going to be putting a plate for the bag to sit on. We're going to test fit the suspension with the stock upper arms as they are. If the upper ball joint wants to bind, we'll have to do a flip. So you take the driver and passenger sides, swap them side to side, flip them upside down, and then mount the ball joints the other way. And then I think you have to do some trimming or plating or whatever. We'll go there if we need to. We're only laying on 17s with drop spindles, so hopefully that won't be an issue. But if it is, we'll cover it. Bell-Tech's instructions on the drop spindles also mention cutting down the threads a little bit on the inners or the outers. I can't remember which. I'll read the directions, I promise, and we'll do that as well. Otherwise, should be pretty straightforward, so we'll check back in when we start laying out the front suspension. All right, we are ready to tackle the front. We've got the other side already tacked in, so we just wanted to kind of prove everything and make sure we were on the right track before we started videoing. So we've got the frame all cleared up where we're going to be welding the upper mount. We've got the lower control arm clearanced, so we had to notch out back here where it would contact the cross member. So here, let me lift it up and you can kind of see. So basically it swings up as far as it can before it basically bottoms out. If we take any more material out of there, it starts getting weak, so we don't want to do that. So we've got our lower plate resting on the arm. We'll end up drilling that out once we dial in the exact position of the bottom bracket. And then the upper plate is going to go on the side of the frame right there with some gussets. So the way we set that up is I've got this piece of pipe that we set right on top of the plate, and that's going to simulate the height of an airbag, just a little over actually. And then on top of that, we've got our bag mount, and that's going to go up against the frame. So I've got this on a pole jack, and I'm going to try to do this one-handed and see how bad this goes. And we're basically just going to bring that lower control arm all the way up. I'm going to move this off of here real quick. Now we're going to go up. So we are completely bottomed out as far as the lower control arm goes. Now we can stack that stuff back on there without dropping it. Boom and boom. And then we can just push this whole assembly up against the frame. And we know once everything's centered up, that is where we need to be. So you can see it's not exactly the same angle as the upper arm or anything. The lower arm is slightly tilted, but this is where we want the bag to be when it's aired out. We want it nice and flat on itself. It can be at an angle as it lifts, but you want it to collapse completely flat. So I'm gonna use two hands and position all of this exactly where I want it. I'm gonna tack that upper plate where it needs to be. I'm gonna tack a couple of gussets where they need to be to hold it in position. And then I'm gonna tack this lower plate right in the same, lined up with this piece of pipe. So everything's in line. And then we can take the lower arm off, drill the hole, finish welding the lower plate and the upper plate, and we should have some bag brackets. locked in. All right. We made a template on the other side of some gussets that will slide down under the upper control arm mount. So we're going to put those right there. And that one just needs to be trimmed down a little bit, and then we'll put that on that side. Lock this all in. Much better. Good deal. There we go. All right, with all of that tacked in place, we can drop the arm back down, pull this cup spacer out, get everything fully welded on the lower arm and the upper bracket, weld up the other side, and then we'll just give it a quick test fit before we paint it all and do final assembly. All right, so welded the plate to the frame and the plate to the gussets, and welded the lower plate to the lower control arm. So we'll let all of that cool off a little bit, and we'll mock it all up back together, make sure everything clears the way we expect, and then bust it apart again and paint. So I'll show you when we reassemble, but we flipped the upper ball joints on the control arms. I'll show you why in just a few, but before I get it all put back together, these little nubs on the shock tower just barely hit the inside of the arm. We could have trimmed the inside of the arm, but I'd rather leave them as strong as possible. So we'll just go ahead and trim these little, I don't even know what they're there for. Doesn't matter, they're going away. So we'll trim those off, grind it all flush, and then I'll show you when we reassemble how tight that clearance is. All right, so everything cooled down. We went ahead and just loosely assembled everything so we can make sure it's all doing what we want it to do. So you can see upper arm, by flipping it, it relieves this ball joint angle a little bit. Still pretty severe, but that's just sort of hard body geometry for you. The lower or the upper arm could really stand to be raised. So we may explore that later for a little bit better camber gain as it cycles. But bag's in a great position. It's not anywhere close to rubbing on anything. Upper and lower arms are all clearanced. So yeah, we should be in good shape. We're gonna bust it all back apart, paint up the frame and everything, and then we'll be ready to final assemble. One thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about lower control arm mods, so we did clearance the backside where it hits the cross member, but we also had to trim down the steering stop. This usually comes up quite a bit higher, and that's in the way of this plate and potentially the bag. So we went ahead and just trimmed it down flush, so it still has a steering stop, but it's just a little lower profile so it doesn't contact anything. I think other than that, oh, and yeah, and you can see where we trimmed off those little tabs. Here, let me bring it down and you can see how close it gets to, okay, come on. Let's see if you can see up in there. So the upper arm, come over to this side, just kind of sneaks past that that upper shock tower. So made more sense to trim that back than trimming out the arm. And there's no reason to remove the shock tower. So I think we're in good shape. So yeah, let's get it apart, get it painted, get it back together, and we'll give you some final shots. All right, I think we're about ready to call it a day. We got the upper and lower arms in, the bag brackets welded up, the airbags installed, steering all reconnected, all the new parts there. Cut down the outer tie rod ends. Beltex instructions cover that for the drop spindles. Got the new tension rods in with the new bushings and everything. Everything's still just loose. We need to tighten all the hardware and install all the cotter pins on the castle nuts and all that good stuff. And then now we can jack the suspension up and see exactly where the wheel is going to hit, or the tire is going to hit in the inner wheel well. And we can get that cut out. So let me show you the other side. Yeah, turned out pretty good. We've got pretty decent power steering leak. I think it's just that connection right there on the hose, I hope. So I'm gonna see if I can fix that for him while it's here, because it's leaving a little bit of a puddle on the ground. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything went together pretty smoothly and seems to cycle really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this thing rides. But yeah, we'll check in next time we're out in the shop. Under the hood, it's actually not going to be too terrible to move everything out of the way. So we've got some wiring over on this side, which we've already started unbolting and unclipping and everything. We should be able to just move most of this harness up and clamp it into place up higher on the inner fender well, because we're not cutting all the way to the top. The power steering reservoir had to be moved over. It normally bolts over here, but we're going to swing it around. The lines have enough slack and everything. We should be able to put it right next to the battery. The fuel filter was bolted on with a bracket, so we're just going to leave that in its position, and after the cutting's done, we'll make a new bracket to sort of secure it over on that side. That should take care of passenger side. Over on the driver's side, we took out the stock air box. I'm going to look and see if we can get that back in position with wheel clearance. If not, we'll I think I have a spare Nissan adapter, and we'll go ahead and bracket that in there and put an open element filter. Charcoal canister, we don't have emissions control over here. I may ditch it. There's no reason to not have it. Like, it doesn't add performance to remove it. So if I can fit it in here cleanly and where it won't hit the wheel, I'll just put it back somewhere and extend the lines to it. No big deal. May lose the windshield washer bottle. Again, I'm just gonna have to see what kind of clearances we have, or if we need to get a smaller version of one. That might be an option. But other than that, there's just a couple wires that I don't even think we'll need to extend them. Again, we can just move them up. So engine bay is pretty straightforward. I'm happy about that. It looked like a lot of stuff, but it all came apart pretty easily. Inside the wheel wells, we took out the plastic liners. We've got this resonator box thing for the stock air box. That's going to go away. And then I believe, yeah, there's another wire harness right here that probably also has the hood release cable. I'm not sure if that's where this is or not, but we'll move that out of the way while we do the cutting, and then tuck it up higher as necessary. So everything has enough slack and everything. It should be pretty straightforward. Plan is we're going to measure and see exactly where it needs to go, but I'm going to try to leave this structure across here. I don't think the upper arm contacts there, and we'll focus our cutting right across here and then just come back through here somewhere. I don't need to go all the way to the firewall. So we're just, cut as little as possible and leave as much of the inner wheel well as possible. We're not tubbing this one. We're just going to leave it exposed. So we want to do the least amount of cutting possible. And that'll, prevent water or dirt or anything from getting into the engine bay as much as we can. later on, if he wants to add some wheel tubs, we want to leave lots of material there for someone else to work with and do the sheet metal work if he wants to tub it in. So yeah, we'll get that marked out once we know exactly where the wheels are going to hit, and then we'll get to cutting. All right, we're getting pretty close here. Let me give you a quick rundown. We got the air management all installed on that plate. Everything's tied up, Teflon taped, zip tied. Should be pretty damn good. Running forward, we've got the 4-link all installed. We got the drive shaft back from the drive shaft shop. We built an exhaust system, and if you don't look too closely at some of the welds, it turned out pretty good. We were able to salvage a muffler from another project that we had pulled the exhaust off of, and the rest of it's all just new tubing running up forward, except for this collector that I had to reuse. Couldn't get anything similar, and it's got the O2 sensor. We extended the wiring on that a little bit, and so that all runs up and tucks up higher than the frame, so I think we're good there. Front suspension is all painted and reassembled. We got all the steering in. Everything's all greased up. New idler arm, new center link, new inner and outer tie rod ends, all that good stuff. We cut out the wheel wells. I'll show you on this side because we've got everything pretty much buttoned up over here. So wheel wells are cut out and wiring's all tucked on this side. For the most part, it looks like we got one little loom that needs to be strapped up, and then that's for the top of the air box. The mass airflow sensor will plug into that. On this side, we still need to finish up the wiring under the hood. All of that stuff that's dangling down, we're just going to make a skid plate essentially so the tire can't contact it. We'll tie it all up to what's left on the inner fender well, relocate that fuse and relay box, and should be good to go there. So I think we are about ready to put some wheels on this and put it back on the ground and check everything out. One thing about those wheels, so I had picked these up for him from a buddy with an Isuzu pickup, and they tucked really nicely on his Isuzu, and I just took for granted, well shoot, 6 lugs should tuck fine, and not the case. Hard bodies run different offsets by a lot. These ended up being about 3 inches too wide. So we found some billet specialties, 18s, that are going to be built, but they won't be ready until, about 2 months from now. So in the meantime, we've got a couple of these for test fitting. They're 17 by 7 inch. I think they're 4Runner spare tire wheels. So we're going to make sure those tuck. They should, according to the numbers. But we'll throw those on the front for now, so we can get this thing off the rack and test fit everything and make sure everything runs the way it's supposed to. And then when the other 2 steel wheels show up, we'll be able to put them on this on the rear and be able to put the bed back on. So getting really close. We've got this harness right here is the taillight wiring. We had to extend that, so we went ahead and loomed it up. When I get this down on the rack, we'll show you the top view and show you kind of how everything cleaned up. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. So big update. Hopefully see this thing laid out in a little bit here. Okay, we had a little change of plans. We went and started putting air in this, and we could see the stock frame. Should have thought of this, but the stock frame was starting to just twist a little bit right back here where the bag was pushing on it. So it makes sense. There's no, there was no support from where the notch was boxed in all the way back to over here. So I went ahead and we pulled everything apart. We plated in the frame back to where the bag mount is, and then brought that in against the outside of the frame rail, and then added this brace over here as well, and then welded the upper bag plate to the frame and gusseted it on the back side. So we should have a bunch of strength there now. Did the same over on this side, just tied it all together, and now it shouldn't want to twist at all. So we just got everything back together on the rear end. All the management and everything is bolted back in, replumbed, rewired, and I think we are ready to take this thing off the lift. All right, quick update for you. It is Sunday. We are getting ready to put the bed on, but I wanted to show off the rear suspension one more time. We did a quick leak check on everything. Everything was solid. Cycled the suspension, checked for any binding, rubbing, anything we missed, did a quick bolt check on it, and we are good. Ran into a little snag. So told you about these wheels being too wide. So we had those on the rear. Now that we want to put the bed on, I had to move the steel wheels to the rears and put the front on jack stands, because here are the two new wheels that showed up yesterday. That one's good. That one's not. They are both labeled as 17x7 6 lug. I don't think so on that one. So I'm waiting to hear back from the seller to see if we can get one next day aired on Monday, to get it here Christmas Eve, so we can get some tires on it and then get this truck back to the customer for Christmas. So we'll see what happens. I might check the local tire shops. I think that's a spare wheel for like a newer 4Runner. So I'm hoping maybe they have something that we can throw on there and get him rolling until the correct one shows up. But in the meantime, front's gonna sit on jack stands. We are ready to put the bed on. I'll show you what we got over here. We got the tailgate in the way, but I measured everything and cut the bed out. And you can see it is ready to put back on. A little cleanup on the edges, and then we're gonna put some more of that rubber, like edge welting or whatever you wanna call it, all around the perimeter of this. Later on, if he goes bigger wheels or whatever, possibly do some custom tubs and a notch cover or whatever. But in the meantime, this kind of clears the way for the bed to sit back down where it needs to, and should give the clearance for the wheels and everything if my measurements are correct. So kind of have to get it on and dump the truck and make sure I'm right. If not, we'll do some more cutting. But this is how we go. Cut a little and cut more if necessary, but I didn't want to cut more than we had to. So yeah, I'll get some help putting the bed on, and hopefully next time you see this thing, it'll be laid out and looking complete. All right, I think we are all set on this thing, and just wrapping it up. I wanted to get under it one more time, just kind of go over it and take a sort of a last walk around. So back here, we've got the ABS 4-path manifold, dual Viair 485s. All the wiring and plumbing and everything is all just tied right to this one big removable panel. So it makes it pretty easy to service if you need to. And you can access everything from behind the truck, just getting under it. So tried to keep it easy. We've got the cantilever set up, or whatever you like calling them. And wishbone link set up, notched the frame. Everything's run up through the frame rails. We built a new exhaust. If you squint, it's mint, but it's all tucked. We notched the torsion bar cross member to tuck it up inside, and merged it way back here. I don't know what that does for performance, but it is a Nissan VG30, so there wasn't a whole lot of performance to speak of in the first place, so no big deal. We got all that exhaust done, and that revealed that the exhaust manifolds were cracked both sides, and there were a couple studs broken on both sides. So we went ahead and replaced those. I'm not even gonna get up in there to show you that. I don't even wanna think about that process again. Up front, new suspension, new upper and lower arms, new steering, replaced the torsion bars with Slam Specialties 6-inch bags, Beltec drop spindles, new tension rod bushings, basically whole new front end, so it should drive great. Actually, I can vouch for it, it does drive great. So yeah, we're gonna get this thing off the rack now, run it over to the car wash, clean it up, and get it ready for him to pick up. All right, as we wrap this thing up and get ready for him to come pick up the truck, just wanted to go over a couple things that we might have glossed over originally. So under the hood, we've cut out the wheel wells and relocated all the wiring, evap stuff, eliminated some stuff that doesn't need to be there for Oklahoma because there's no smog laws. Relocated the power steering reservoir and tightened up those hoses because it had a bit of a leak. Did the exhaust manifolds. Trust me, they're down there. Tucked all the wiring on this side, relocated a couple brake lines. Basically made sure that these wheels are clearing, and when the new 18-inch wheels are done next month, we'll be able to just bolt those on and not have to re-clearance anything. In the back, sort of the same deal. We cut the bed floor out and just added some, what do you call that, like welting or whatever, to clean up the cut edge. So we cut what should be necessary for the 18-inch wheels when they're done, with the exception of the inner sheet metal of the bedside. So we're gonna wait on that and see how the new wheels fit. These, when it's all the way down, just barely scuff that inner sheet metal, but I didn't want to cut it out if it's not going to be necessary for the 18, so we'll just wait and see. Other than that, inside, we added a couple of digital air pressure gauges there in the center console. Here, I'll power it up real quick. So we've got all four corners monitored there, and just a simple AVS 7-switch box. So, you know, front up and down, rear up and down, each individual corner, and then all up, all down. So nice and simple, easy to use. Should be no problem for him to get the hang of. So yeah, really, truck's done other than just waiting for the new wheels to be built. So not super happy about rolling on mismatched stuff, but with the drop spindles up front, we couldn't run 14s, and these 17s wouldn't tuck in the rear. So he just gets to live with it for, I think Ben over at Buddy's Garage was saying end of February. So hopefully it doesn't go too far beyond that. It's not show season right now, so it'll be okay waiting. But other than that, this thing is ready to roll. He should be here in about an hour. We're just gonna give it a quick wipe down and send it on its way. Well, that wraps this one up. It was a fun project. It's neat to get to work on a mini truck again. I hope it leads to more mini trucks coming this way. It's a good little distraction from Cadillacs. Next up, 65 Cadillac. So I'll make that one a really quick video because you've already seen everything we've done on those. It's not anything earth-shattering. But I'll try to look at some of the older videos we've posted and see if there's anything I didn't cover on those. And then when that one's done next week, after that we have a really special car coming in. So that one I'm really looking forward to, and it's going to be a bit of a dash to get it done in time for a show that we're taking it to for the customer. So stay tuned. I will try to get better about posting more often. In the meantime, thanks again for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff means a lot. It's the comments especially. Love seeing what you guys are building. Love you reaching out with questions and stuff. That's that's what these videos are about, is sort of to inform and show the way we do things. Not that it's the only way to do it, but hopefully it helps guide you and shows you what you want to do or maybe what you don't want to do. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. I love it.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, man, be safe.
Brother.